42-year-old organization. Our mission is to educate and advocate for the conservation and improvement of Tennessee's environment, our communities, and public health. And over the years, we've kind of been working on the message, the elevator speech, and that's come out to that natural resources, our forests, our fields, our rivers, our streams, our lakes, waterways, are the backbone of our economy, our communities, and public health. And when I started in 2007, we developed really 3 core programs. You'd think an organization that was 37 years old would have core programs in place. It'd be well funded. It'd be really doing well. But when I took it over, it didn't have any money in the bank. In fact, it owed money to attorneys. Are there any attorneys in here? Some attorneys that were representing us in a case down in Chattanooga against Walmart, where they had busted a conservation easement. We owed them like $40,000, and we didn't have any core programs. And one of the things, as Jennifer and I were talking about last night, about what are you doing in the environmental movement? A lot of people are identifying themselves with the negative message, which is I'm against this or I'm against that. And I knew that when I took over that I wanted to do something a little bit different from that. I wanted to have some things that I was for. And so we started 3 programs. One of those programs was Sustainable Tennessee, which is what I'll talk about today. But we also started the Tennessee Tree Project, which has a goal of planting 1 million trees, planting and or caring for 1 million trees. We planted a bunch of trees in Murfreesboro. We're going to actually be planting some trees here in Knox County at one of the parks in November. We're planting trees in Chattanooga. To date, we've planted about 75,000 trees since I got started. A lot of those are bare root seedlings. We also do tree giveaways as a part of that. Trees are probably the single most important thing you can plant, or planting trees is probably the single most important thing you can do for sustainability, because they have, as the traditional definition of sustainability goes, they have economic benefits, they have environmental benefits, and they have community or social benefits. For example, a house that has a mature tree in the yard may be worth 20% more or 10% more, than a house same house that doesn't have a mature tree in the yard. That's $20,000 on a $200,000 home. So that might be the difference between being right side up and upside down in your mortgage. Some of the community benefits, which I find really fascinating: more trees, less crime, less graffiti, less litter. People have a better sense of well-being. Nature has this restorative capacity to it to restore our sense of well-being, the psychologists or psychiatrists call it. And then, of course, the environmental benefits, everything from cleaner air, which also has human health benefits because trees filter out air pollutants, microhabitat for insects, which attracts birds, which enhance our quality of life. So trees I like to say that trees not only have all these 3 characteristics of sustainability, but when you start talking about stools, and the 3-legged stool of sustainability, well, the stool is actually made out of wood. So there's, the tree it's one of the most important things you can do. I'm going to mention a couple of dates at the end of my presentation. 2 of those dates are our 10K tree days, and where we plant 10,000 trees across the state in one day. So I mentioned those. Second program we started was our Watershed Support Center, and that program is all about going into communities and helping them restore streams to fishable and swimmable, which the original Clean Water Act had the goal of restoring all the streams to fishable and swimmable by 1985. I don't know how many of you just heard Gary Davis's presentation, but of course he was filing litigation in 1983 against the Department of Energy for not having any permits, basically, on all these discharges at Oak Ridge. So we didn't make it by 1985. We're working with communities trying to help them restore streams. One of the things that we know about our rivers and streams that they really need, one of the most important things you can do for them is plant trees, believe it or not, on the creek banks. All right, plant trees on the creek banks or the riparian zone or stream side zone. Big time ecological benefits associated with planting trees there. If you're an environmental science major, hopefully you've heard of the concept of ecotone, or a biology major. Ecotone or edge effect in ecology just means it's a transition zone from one place to another, one type of habitat to another. The river to the upland area, that edge of the river, that riparian or streamside zone, has 1.5 times the biodiversity. It has 1.5 times the ecological value of the river, the aquatic environment, or the terrestrial, the upland terrestrial zone. So anyway, planting trees on creek banks, it's one of the big things we do in urban areas. We also work to fix creek banks. A lot of times in urban areas, you've got real flashy streams because of all the asphalt and rooftops, and it's causing those stream channels to widen to try to carry the increased floodwaters. So it's ripping the banks out. And so we're in there trying to fix those creek banks because as they erode away, they add sediment, mud to the system. As they add that sediment and mud to the system, it destroys fish and aquatic life. It drives drinking water costs up because it costs more to treat those things. So those two programs, two things we're really for, fish and aquatic life and planting trees. That was the conversation I had with Jennifer, and I really encourage you, not that you wouldn't go out and fight some stuff, but pick some positive stuff to go for. And I spent a lot of time, the first probably 10 years of my quote-unquote environmental career, running myself in the ground with lots of negative stuff. And I had never really thought about it until me and Jennifer's conversation last night. But it drags you down. It's what we call burnout, you know. So pick some positive stuff. Not that you're not going to fight a coal plant or a Walmart or what have you, but pick some positive stuff to do. Trees is one of the best things. There's nobody who can't plant a tree. It's really a good activity. The Environmental Council, a little bit about our history. We filed a lawsuit against TVA in the 70s. TVA said that they were not under the jurisdiction of the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, and we differed with them and brought them into compliance, quote unquote, if you can say that they're still in compliance. In the 70s, got them involved in the regulations of the Clean Air Act. We also had some litigation in the mid-90s against Dana Corporation in the Duck River watershed, which is the most biologically diverse river system in Tennessee, the country, the world, depends on who you talk to. 54 or so different types of freshwater mussels, 151 different types of fish, and that's more than the continent of Europe combined, and then 20 or so different types of snails. Can you say escargot? I see, I gotta have a little biology humor in there, okay? Yeah, that's snails, escargot. So we won $1.125 million in that lawsuit. That was the settlement. Now, I think Dana Corporation didn't admit to doing anything wrong, but they paid the money. Okay, so I'll let y'all take what you will from that. That went into the Tennessee Environmental Endowment, and it's been basically given out for, it was given out for a number of years, and then they gave it all away. It was supposed to be an endowment that just generated interest. I don't know what they were thinking, but they gave it all away. So, and when I started in 2007, I got our bylaws, or late 2006, I got our bylaws, and I read our bylaws, and our bylaws said, you're supposed to have a conference, you're supposed to bring all the environmental folks together and develop an agenda for the legislature. And I asked the board, had we been doing that? And they said, well, no, not really. And I said, well, since it's in our bylaws, do you think maybe we should? And they were like, well, you know, if you think you can. And I was like, well, you know, I guess. So let's try to do that. And we started this program called Sustainable Tennessee. Our first meeting was in '07, and the goal was to unite environmental community, citizens, conservation group, environmental policy experts, elected officials, businesses, educational institutions, and more, to speak with one voice about priority policy and practice issues that impact our states. To date, we've had about 750 individuals and over 250 different organizations have participated. And one of the things I want to say about what we did that was different, right or wrong, I'm beginning to believe, well, you know, the best mistakes are the ones you learn from. Two things. At that time in '07, there was a big sustainability movement everywhere. It was before the Tea Party had taken over, and there was, you know, businesses, industries, government, everybody was leaning over towards sustainability. So we said, you know what, let's get everybody in the room and see if we can get them to agree. And what we've come to know about businesses in particular, and to some degree educational institutions, is that the businesses are really only interested in advocating. This is not completely true, as is the case with many blanket statements. They're almost never completely true. But many of the businesses are only going to advocate for things that they are going to make money on. That's really that's their primary focus. And instead, what they really should be doing, which is what my father told me a long time ago, he said, son, you should look to provide a service to your community, and then the money will follow that. Same thing what Gary Davis was saying. You need to be doing things for the right reason, right? So, educational institutions are a lot of times largely tied back to that funding source. And so it's difficult sometimes to get them to actually participate in some sort of advocacy. Now, their research oftentimes supports the advocacy efforts, but getting them, you know, engaged in that, it's proving very, very difficult. The other thing that we did, and which is kind of leading me to, and I'm just going to put this out there, is leading me back to this idea that what we really need to be doing is working with the activist community and trying to figure out how to get them to really coalesce as a group and work functionally together, and importantly, figure out where we can have the point of our attack collectively. We're attacking on many different fronts, but we have no point to the attack. And that's really where Sustainable Tennessee is trying to move to. The other thing we did differently, policy. A lot of people just want to talk about policy. Let's go to the legislature. Let's go to TDEC or EPA, policy, policy, policy. But the other thing we wanted to do was we wanted to talk about practice. Because I don't care how good your policy is, if it's not getting practiced correctly, the policy is worthless. We've got one of the best water quality laws in the state of Tennessee across the country. But the implementation of that law it varies, but it's weak. It's weak. So the practice of how you do that. Also, one of the things, when we put that up there, one of the things that came out of that very first meeting was plant trees. It's a practice. Plant trees. That's one of the main reasons we started our Tennessee Tree Project. Where Sustainable Tennessee is now, it really provides this infrastructure. We have an annual summit coming up October 29th in Chattanooga. We'll have another one in December in Gallatin at Volunteer State Community College. We do a Conservation Education Day. Now, we're a 501c3. We started to call it a Conservation Lobby Day, but we don't lobby. Well, we can spend 20% of our budget lobbying, so we called it Conservation Education Day. It's a great opportunity for us to have the point of that spear or of that attack at the Tennessee legislature. We also do some other events. We've got the Sustainable Tennessee Agenda, which is really a 14 or 15-page document driving. We tried to, in that document, it's a dynamic document, it's constantly changing, but it's the most comprehensive sustainability document in Tennessee that I know of, that in its policy and practice to move Tennessee towards sustainability. And I actually have copies of, we have the Tennessee agenda, and then every year in August we prioritize that agenda. I've got some copies of the priorities. I've also got those on my jump drive. If you want copies of them, I can just load them onto your computer. The priorities is just that yearly document, the fact sheet. We have task force meetings via Google Groups. We have regular meetings with TDEC. We do a brown bag with TDEC once a quarter. And that was actually started by the Tennessee Water Groups, and we've kept doing it there. Tennessee Water Group still does it. State legislature, on our Conservation Education Day, we oftentimes will meet with the leadership in the House and the Senate, Speaker Harwell and Lieutenant Governor Ramsey. The cycle there, the August Policy and Practice meeting, we review and update the priority agenda issues and develop strategies to advance these issues. We'll look at what's on those priority lists in just a minute. It's kind of towards the end. October 29th, you've got the Regional Summit in Chattanooga, launch action on our priority issues, speakers to educate basically about the top issues, sessions to set strategies and tactics for those priority issues, networking and collaboration. The more I begin to learn about this, I think where this meeting is going, and this meeting, it's going to be more, not this one in particular, it's pretty much already said, it's really got kind of a business focus to it. This one does not have an agenda as of yet, but where it's really going is going to be back towards the activist community and trying to get them engaged so that we can figure out, can we really have a point to that attack? Some place that everybody puts some time, or most everybody puts some time and effort into. In January, well actually what we've done is we've moved the January news conference to the Conservation Education Day, where we hope all of you will come down to the legislature, set up a table, lobby your legislators on bills that you're interested in. And we take this out of the page book of one of our arch enemies at the legislature. They're not really our enemies. I went to school with Radonna Rose, who's the chief lobbyist now for the Farm Bureau. They have a legislative breakfast, they call it. They bring in somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 to 1,000 people. 10 people for every legislator down there. 10 people out of every county. They give them a list of bills that they support and that they oppose. And they have one person in the group that goes into the legislator's office. They lay that down. That person's versed on many of those bills and certainly on their top priorities. And they say, all these people, they're with me. And we don't support this, we support this, we don't. And they're all constituents. And until we bring our constituents down there, nothing's going to happen. It does me no good whatsoever to go in and lobby Senator Sutherland, who's the chair of the Senate Environment Committee, or they don't call it environment anymore, by the way, it's the Natural Resource Committee. So, it does me no good whatsoever to go in there. Are you in my district? No. You don't vote for me, do you? No. What do you say? You know, you've got to have people from those districts. You've got to have people from those districts. But the other part of this is, we actually had a meeting set up with Senator Sutherland yesterday, but we couldn't get anybody out of the district to meet with us, or to meet with him. So we ended up postponing the meeting. The other part of this is, on Conservation Education Day, we need to fill those halls with people. Tables, booths, displays. The only other time I've seen it done really well was when the Tennessee Recreation and Parks Association did it. And they had all of their people, all the parks departments came down there. But we have just never been able to really, we've had some good shows down there, and we have passed out stickers, green means jobs, and Sustainable Tennessee stickers, and end up getting a lot of people to take those stickers, which is good. But we need, when the legislator walks down the hall, we need that room, that hall filled with the conservation and environmental message. And the only way that's going to happen is you guys coming down there, bringing your organizations down there. And I know it's going to be on a weekday, and you're going to have to take off from school, you're going to have to take off from work, but those guys down there are not meeting on a weekend for us. It's not going to happen. Let's see. The agenda itself is this 16-page comprehensive document that identifies priorities for clean land, water, air, and energy. All of this, by the way, I don't know, do y'all have access to the internet here? You can find it, you don't know, you can find it on tectn.org, and I do have it on this jump drive, which I can let y'all have in just a second as soon as I get through my PowerPoint. The group votes on top priority issues for 2013, energy efficiency, renewables, limiting mountaintop removals, smart regs for fracking, supporting recycling and compost, and land use planning. That's what happens at that August meeting. Does anybody want a hard copy of those priorities? I've got like 10 hard copies. That's the first page of it. I did try to make them double-sided, but I am pretty technically challenged. Oh, yours is double-sided. One of them worked, but the rest of them did not work. That's the first page of it. So, but you know, the regulations for fracking, are you guys familiar with what happened there? So in Tennessee, we've got some pretty good regulations for fracking. The only problem is they don't apply to any of the fracks that are happening in Tennessee, because the threshold for application is 200,000 gallons of material going down the hole. Well, in Tennessee, the typical frack is less than 200,000 gallons. So there are very few of them that are actually getting regulated. The group also puts out fact sheets with more information on key issues, on the priorities. We have an advocacy toolkit online. Again, going back to the sort of infrastructure. Our summit is going to be October 29th in Chattanooga. Is anybody here from Chattanooga? No? Where's everybody from? East Tennessee? Who's from out of Tennessee?
North Carolina.
North Carolina, okay. And then again, that half-day event in Gallatin. This is currently scheduled for December 3rd, which I think is a Tuesday. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to push that to a Saturday and try to really get the activist community engaged in it. The News Conference and Conservation Education Day, or Day on the Hill, combined as one event, February 19th. There will be tables available for organizations and businesses to table there at the Legislative Plaza. And then we will definitely have meetings with the House and Senate leadership, but which is important, but what's more important than that is you going and meeting with your individual legislator and developing a relationship with your individual legislator. We have meetings quarterly with Deputy Commissioner McFadden, who used to be on our board of directors. And you know, I realize TDEC's getting a lot of really bad press, if you will, in the environmental community and the activist community, but they actually have done some okay things from sort of a structural standpoint. Their budget, like everybody's budget, has been cut. They have developed a technical track for engineers and the like to advance. Prior to this, the only way they could advance was that they had to become managers. And lots of engineers are really bad managers. They also got some external affairs people that have some real good communication skills, which you don't find necessarily with your technical people. They don't really understand well how to communicate. So some good things have going. The next topic is the composting, which is going to be November 14th in Nashville. I believe there's also going to be a call-in number for that, so if you wanted to call in, you could call in for that. The other thing that we're doing with a small grant from Patagonia is trying to carry out these in-district meetings. We call it our Key Districts Project. It's really trying to identify constituents in key districts across the state. Those key districts are defined as the members of the House and Senate Natural Resources Committee. In the legislature, if you can get a bill that you don't like stopped in a committee where there's 9 people and you only have to get 5 of them to vote your way, then you can win. If you can get those same 5 people to vote a bill that you like out of that committee, then chances are when it gets to the floor, most bills, 90–95% of the bills, once they get to the floor, they're going to pass. Because all the other members think, and it's out of courtesy, the committee did its job. So focusing on those committees is the critical linchpin, if you will. Identifying constituents of those committee members is critical to moving legislation out of the committee and through, or stopping legislation that you don't like. So we're trying to have in-district meetings with key members of the House and Senate Natural Resources Committee. We've got Gardenhire and Forgany? I don't know how to pronounce his name, in Athens for 10/28 before our summit down there. And we need all the help we can get to get these constituents out. To get people that can vote them in or vote them out. That's who they're going to listen to. The task force meetings, the conference calls every other week with leaders of the organizations and businesses to help plan Sustainable Tennessee. The Google group and shared Google Calendar allow group leaders to communicate about important events and actions, allowing other participants to share with their own organizations, members, etc. We used to maintain a calendar of all the environmental stuff going on across the state, especially Middle Tennessee. They used to refer to us as the Bellmead Environmental Club. Bellmead's a real ritzy place down in Nashville. I wish we could get some of their money now, okay? It's not exactly happening. We've got 1 member at Bellmead, and that's it. So, but you know, that calendar is really important, as well as the communication. But again, I have to step back from all the great work that folks are doing and say, you know, we're coming at folks in this broad line of attack. We got to figure out how to get a point. And you know, if we can get a point and get some wins under our belt, then we can start broadening that line. Keep the point in place, choose something new, but then we can start broadening that line. And as you know, one of my board members once said, this was at the very beginning of Sustainable Tennessee, said, you know, we're fighting mountaintop removal, but gosh, how could we cripple the coal market in other ways? How could we stop mountaintop removal in other ways? Well, what if everybody in the Tennessee Valley maximized energy efficiency in their homes and businesses? We could cut residential energy use by 50%. TVA, what would TVA do? They'd freak out, because they wouldn't have near the money coming in. They would freak out. So, I mean, there's different ways of getting at things. And back to that conversation Jennifer and I had last night, we got to have something positive. I'm not saying we don't need to be fighting something, but we got to have something positive to keep our own motivation and our own spirits up. Anyway, so don't get me started. I already got me started. Sorry. Again, I want to point out that it's not just about policy. It's about practice. It's about engaging communities. You know, last year in 2012, we had over 3,000 volunteers out planting trees mostly. They, on average, gave us about, I think, an hour and a half or 2 hours worth of work. That equated to an in-kind value for us of $60,000, which is money we didn't have to plant trees. And we had businesses, industries, we had school groups, scout groups, church groups, you name it, we had them out there. And all of those people, once we got their email address, became members. And so it's a great way, the practices are a great way for you to engage communities. And again, I'm going back to my tree deal. That's a great thing. But you know what? Changing your light bulbs out to the compact fluorescents, doing an energy audit and upgrading your home, driving less, buying a hybrid. I bought a used one, so it was the best I could do. But I got one, you know. And the reality is, it's paying. I drive a lot, unfortunately. It's paying me back. It's paying me back. It almost doubled my gas mileage.
Build an electric.
Well, you know, at some point I might. Yeah, at some point I might. What I'd like to do is be riding my bike and riding the train. So, recycling. You know, I mean, I thought we had the recycling thing in, you know, in the 90s, but I mean, look at all the waste that's still being landfilled. We really, I mean, we're recycling more, but the reality is we're still wasting 70% of the used natural resources, also known as garbage, going to the landfill. It's compostable, it's cardboard, it's paper products. You know, we're still not there as a society. We're still dragging way behind. These are the results of our online poll for the top priorities for this year. And the first thing was supporting energy efficiency, conservation, and renewables. Hey, is anybody in here for solar power? How about wind power? Okay, so you already got stuff here for energy efficiency, conservation. Of course, we know that this and this are where we get our biggest return on investment in terms of energy generation. That's right, we can generate energy by not wasting it. It's already being produced. So, the second one was regulating fracking in Tennessee to protect land, air, and water. As I told you before, the fracking regs in Tennessee are pretty good, as I understand them, and I'm not a geologist. They're pretty good. They just don't apply to anything. You know, the threshold's too high. Limiting mountaintop removal, coal mining, there again, those two, you know, are linked. Limiting nuclear proliferation and radioactive waste in Tennessee. I know Don Safer, my board member, is doing a presentation on this. I think it's tomorrow. Protect land use planning and zoning, which this has, of course, been under attack by the Tea Party. Any new government regulation or anything that's going to tell a private landowner what he can or cannot do on his property, no matter how it affects his neighbors, none of that. Recycling solid waste and supporting recycling and composting in Tennessee. That brown bag, we've been working a little bit with an industrial composting facility there in Middle Tennessee, and they've been getting hammered by TDEC, mainly because they've been getting a lot of complaints. And I'm not sure their operation it's not perfect. It's solid waste management. That's what it is. But it's better than landfilling. And we got to figure out how to promote those things as opposed to holding them back. Those dates to remember: October 29th, the Chattanooga Summit; December 3rd, the Gallatin Summit; February 19th, our Sustainable Tennessee News Conference and Conservation Education Day. I really need y'all to be there. Need you to be there. And then February 8th and March 1st, I put that up there because it's one of my favorite, two of my favorite days in the year, the 10K tree days. And then I got a couple of questions, just sort of to hopefully stimulate some conversation in the last few minutes that we got. I guess we got to end at 11. Is that 11:15? Okay. Well, we'll be done before then, hopefully. I taught college for years, and students always liked to get out early. They always, that was the only place you paid for something and then tried to get out again. All right. So actually, on these questions first, you don't have a copy of the agenda. But look at that agenda. Is there something missing? Is there something that we need to adjust or correct in that agenda? Is there some fact that we're missing that would help justify what we're saying to do in that agenda? Take a look at that agenda. And if you have access to the internet here, then you can go online at tectn.org and go to Programs, Sustainable Tennessee, and find it. Yeah, have you looked at it? My last question there. But then the other questions that really relate back to Sustainable Tennessee and how we can work together. You know, how can we work together? How can we do a better job of working together? What is it that we need to be doing? What is it that the council should do? What is it that you should do? It's hard, but I learned teaching college that when you ask a question, you're supposed to be quiet. So sometimes I had to tell my students, I'm actually looking for an answer. Lauren?
I think really we could start having conference calls in December about planning for the upcoming legislative session. Because we really do need to start planning it ahead, because lobbyists are probably already meeting with them in their home districts now.
Well, and you know, that's an interesting point, because they've been meeting with them all year. I mean, they really have. So, and that, the conference calls that are going on can absolutely be used for that. If you'll get on our website and sign up for our email, then you'll start seeing when those calls are happening. They're typically happening on Tuesdays or Wednesdays at the lunch hour, like 11:30 to 12:30. What else?
I'm still serious about that build your own electric. There's a club here in Knoxville that does nothing but focus on electrics. I had a chance to drive one 2 weeks ago, the new Nissan Leaf.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course there was the flagship, the Tesla S there. Oh, I don't even want to think about it.
Really?
But working with this group here in Knoxville, I think it's going to be my focus.
Mm-hmm.
Although I'm 100 miles north of here, and east.
Okay. All right.
Be a challenge to make that 200 miles with one or no charges.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's been my problem with the Leaf. My commute is about 60 miles.
When I was manager,
round trip, so I guess I could have made it with the Leaf, because it's got about 100 miles.
almost.
Almost 100.
To be real gentle with it. In 1970, when I was sales manager at Davis Motor Company here in Knoxville, we sold a Saab station wagon to an engineer in Oak Ridge. He had a 100-mile range on regular standard lead-acid batteries, or 100-mile-an-hour top speed. That car's still somewhere in this area, and I'm trying to find it. That was a 68-mile Saab station wagon.
Wow.
He converted from 2-stroke or 4-stroke, I don't know which one he used, because we sold him 2 of them. And he's dead now, but the car's still around, I think.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
Maybe we could just do some like phone meet and greets. I feel like we always rush through introductions on any calls, you know. So maybe we could just have some general discussion calls, across like organizations for us to work together. Like a little bit more informal, like, just sharing recent news they found. Like sharing, meeting with the representative or some other official
Right.
or something they read in their local paper.
Right.
Besides like getting straight to a current campaign.
Right. Right. Jennifer, did you have something?
I've got a question, John, not a solution.
All right.
Not
Good
knowing a
college
whole,
professor.
sorry?
Good college professor.
Yeah, not knowing a whole lot about, or all the details of y'all's work and the various strategies, but clearly, trying to influence state law, state policy is a big one. And earlier, you were talking about, well, think about who your representatives are and how you're gonna persuade them, right? So I have the dubious honor of being represented by Stacy Camfield. Right? Exactly, right? So,
Right.
and now this is the second talk I've been to today where I've heard, folks working in this field complaining very seriously about the influence of the Tea Party and Tea Party style politics, at the state level. So are y'all, or as a coalition, are there folks out there rather than just trying to take these meetings, rather than just trying to go and lobby, are y'all working with the League of Conservation Voters or anybody else to try and, actually affect who's elected? I'm not stupid enough to think, I'm just gonna get Campfield out and get, some hippie.
Our sister organization, the Tennessee Conservation Voters, which is the league affiliate in Tennessee, does a little bit of that. I cannot get involved in electioneering. I am prohibited from being involved in electioneering. Now, my board could give me 2 months off during an election year at vacation time, if they could afford it, and I could go and do whatever I wanted on my free time. And that was one of the strategies that had been suggested, in going and trying to help people get elected. But the nature of the beast is that the resources are so limited. They've gone through 2 executive directors in my 7 years, 6 year, however long I've been here, tenure. And one was around for about 4 years, and then the other one was only around for about 6 months. And so they've had a real difficult time financially. Now they have a really good lobbyist who works for about maybe 10 or 12 different social agencies, including the Tennessee Conservation Voters. So the short answer to that question is no, there's nobody really engaged in the electioneering part of getting these guys thrown out of office or reelected, the guys you want reelected. Now the corollary to that is, I said it in the meeting with Gary Davis, or in his talk, that we had worked very closely with Sheila Butt, Representative Sheila Butt, from down in the Spring Hill area, and she was the one who offered the legislation that was defeated. It didn't pass. That would have prohibited anybody who took state money, of which we take state money. We get money, EPA, through the state, and we get money from TWRA to plant trees in Department of Agriculture. But it would have prevented anybody who took money from the state of doing anything relative to sustainability. And we actually worked closely with her to help her understand that a lot of the state departments would no longer be allowed to work with themselves, because they're all at some level or another defining activities relative to sustainability. And so we started trying to work with her to redefine what sustainability is. In Georgia, the Tea Party and the environmentalists just passed something, I don't know the very specifics of it, around promoting solar energy for your home. The Tea Party liked it because it made you independent, could get you off the grid. You were no longer subservient to the man. And of course, the environmentalists liked it because it was solar power, renewables. And so, you know, as we think forward, we're really trying to think in more strategic ways about offering legislation that we might be able to get the Tea Party actually behind. And Representative Butt, one of the reasons we started the tree project was because we wanted to try to be able to go into any district and do something positive. And when we did it, we would invite legislators to come and be a part of it. We'd invite the mayor and the senator and the House of the representative to be a part of it, to build that relationship with them so that when we showed up in their office, they knew who we were, and hopefully we've gotten them some ink, some good press, because we always want the press out there on our tree planting events. So part of our thing is that, you know, educational message too. But if we can get that legislator planting trees in the newspaper, then we've just kind of created a little good karma between us and them. It might not overcome the Farm Bureau's constituents, but they're going to think nicely about us instead of those rabid environmentalists. So I think that, for us anyway, because we can't be involved in electioneering, for us, that's probably that and the Key District Project are the best strategies that we have right now for moving anything positive in the legislature. So, yes, sir.
Just an idea, but yeah, we always talk about different ways to generate energy. I just feel like it's oftentimes never even talked about different ways to distribute energy than power lines or, you know, stuff like that. Because, you know, we end up cutting a lot of trees down,
Yeah.
and, you know, stuff like that just because of power lines. I feel like that they look like something that should be temporary. Personally, they don't, you know. But that's just a thought.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting because there's all kinds of sort of detractors associated with energy distribution. The trees is like the most aesthetic, visible thing that you see. But you know, all over those lines, you lose power as it's transmitted. You know, so I heard a fellow, David Feldman, I believe his name was, he was the director of TVA in the 70s, and he said that we could actually generate power in space with solar panels 24/7 from the sun and tether it back to Earth. Now, I don't know exactly what he meant by that, but so is there some, you know, you got cell phone signals going all over the place. Could you do the same with electric power? I don't know, you know.
And that's what the whole Tesla theory was.
Well, he thought he could transmit it to the Earth.
Right.
He built a plant in Long Island that is now goes good. But I don't think it ever worked. At least not demonstrably.
Right.
Just
It never got past the theory.
Right. Well, as Einstein said, no, who invented the light bulb? Sorry. Edison, thank you very much. He said, well, I know 99 ways how not to make a light bulb. So, it's the same thing for us with Sustainable Tennessee. I think I know how to not make it work now pretty well. So, yes.
Just a question about lobbying. I've been to the lobbying days, and it's sort of a lobbying scrum, might be a good definition of what you say.
Sure.
The people who have, the industries particularly, who have full-time people in Nashville or wherever, get things done. Now there's a couple of ways to approach it. First, you said the person you use has 10 or 12 clients. Would that be Stuart?
Stuart, yeah.
Yeah,
Stuart,
okay.
yeah.
So, anyhow, the idea of getting someone more dedicated than Stuart, even though he's dedicated, he's also
Right,
10 to 12 pieces,
right.
would be good. I understand that there's a lot of other classifications of 501s where you can raise money and use it for politics.
Right,
It's apparently not deductible by the donor,
Right.
but other than that,
right.
you know, the Tennesseans for Fair Taxation used to have like two groups, the 501c3 and the 501, whatever the heck the other two
Right.
things were. So they had their own lobbying arm.
Right,
It was controlled by the same people, it
Right.
just
sure.
bookkeeping trick more than
Right,
anything
right.
else.
Well, I think, well, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I think one of the problems is the conservation voters has a C4, 501c4, and a 501c3. I asked their president the other day, I said, well, why don't I get a C4? Why doesn't the Environmental Council have a C4 too? And of course, they don't like that idea. And I don't really like the idea of them having a C3. It doesn't make sense to me. We ought to be working together. And at some level, in the 90s, they had an executive director who was their chief lobbyist. And that's really what, from a practical standpoint, they need to go back to. They're scared to do that because, this is me just guessing, this is where I would be if I was on their board. They're scared to do that because very limited funding. They generate a specific amount of money with one event in the year called Nature Votes. It's a great event, it's an auction, and they recognize some legislators there and whatnot, at dinner or heavy appetizers in a bar. But that money pretty much, I think, all goes to pay Stewart. And, Stewart does a great job. He's got a lot of experience. He's got a lot of strong relationships, even on the other side of the aisle, And the reality is that, he did some great work last year. We beat back a number of different things. Because the reality is, a lot of times we think, well, the Democrats are our only friends, but a lot of times they're our worst enemies. And there are some really good conservative Republicans that are very green. Now, they're not yelling and screaming about it, but they can sideline some things real easily for us, and have done that very quietly behind the scenes. And the Speaker of the House lives in a very, very green district, Beth Harwell. So she's actually been out planting trees with us. And
Cool.
sorry now, I moved out of the range of the camera.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right.
But there's a lot of different ways for us to do it. And the fact of the matter is, we need young people to get in these leadership positions. We need y'all on our board. We need sort of a whole new wave of people to lead the environmental movement, people who are tech savvy. Unlike myself, I'm technically challenged, by the way. It's a new handicap. I've got a handicap sticker and everything. But we really need young people to get in these leadership positions and help the older people. The old activist mentality has been valuable, but there's really got to be a new, more strategic way of going about it. And y'all are the ones that are going to bring it to us. So, and it's your world that you're inheriting. It was mine, but I'm transferring it over.
Well, we're not all ready to go out to pasture.
Yeah. Well, and I'm with you on that. And there's a ton you can learn from the activists. There's a ton that you can learn. You should always be thinking about that because they've got incredibly valuable experience.
We've made all the mistakes.
There you go. There you go. But with the day of social media and Twitter and Facebook and whatever else is out there and texting and all of that, it's like we ought to be able to bring the phone system at the legislature to a crash. You know, we ought to be able to bring it to a crash with constituents calling in. But we hadn't been able to figure that out yet. I think that's because we're not maybe tech savvy enough, even though I think our Facebook page and our website and our Twitter feeds and all of that stuff is really, man, it's leagues above where it was when I started, primarily because we got a marketing person, somebody who understood marketing. And a lot of this is about that. It's about marketing. And back to the conversation me and Jennifer had last night. What are you for? Are you always against something? That's just, you know, we constantly get criticized for that. And marketing is about the message. And if you go up and fight against Walmart or industry or whatever, what are they going to say? The message is always the same. Oh, it's going to cost jobs. People are going to lose their jobs because of these wacko environmentalists. And we're going to, no, this is going to create jobs. It's going to stimulate the economy. You know, I've said it a bunch of times and I'll say it a bunch more, is the green economic revolution is bigger than the agricultural, industrial, and chemical revolutions combined, because it's basically reworking in a sustainable fashion all of the infrastructure and all of the techniques and all of the methodologies that created all the problems we're looking at now.
Look what it's done in Germany.
There you go. So, I mean, it's, you know, it's a huge economic opportunity. Yes, ma'am.
As far as getting more young people involved, we're a student group at MTSU, and I've noticed that what we like to do a lot of is stuff like planting trees and recycling. That's what many people tell me that they want to do. And so, like, if
We'll
you
be planting
guys-
trees over Garrison Creek in November
Okay.
on Northwest Cassis.
If you create things for us to do, that's a really good way to get us involved. And that's what I've noticed, is that we like to get our hands dirty.
Actually, we've planted about 3,000 trees out there, and most of them were planted by MTSU students. So, yeah. What else? Lana, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I've been going to these lobby days year to year, and I mean, I've been twice now. I guess I'll go again in the spring.
Right.
And I have noticed that it is missing to have more college-age students there on lobby day as constituents. And I think we could work together, maybe like crowdsourcing newsletters, like sharing what's going on. Because in, you know,
See, I don't even know what crowdsourcing is.
yeah, like
I don't even know what it is.
it's like basically like how you work at a newspaper. You have different departments, creating subsections, and then put together all in one newspaper. I think maybe internet newsletters could be that way, an email, like a newspaper, instead of depending on one communications person, so stuff doesn't get bottlenecked. 'Cause, like, that's been a problem in the past. So news doesn't get out till it's almost too late to do actions.
Right. Right. Anything else?
You made it to 11:15.
Oh, man. All right, man. Thank you guys for coming. Please fill the evaluation.